Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and this short video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the Vuhledar offensive, where the Russians, as a result of offensive actions that have been taking place for the previous few days, managed to encircle the Ukrainians completely. A lot of changes on the ground, a lot of videos we received during the previous 12 hours, so let's discuss them in details. And first let's talk about the changes on the ground. According to information we have, the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to improve their positions on the eastern flank of Vuhledar offensive and to take under control this landfill. This information was provided by neutral mapper. As for the southwestern flank, the Russians, as a result of offensive, also managed to maintain the line of combat contact and to take under control additional fortifications and tree lines and roads. So this information was confirmed by neutral mappers, by pro-Russian mapper, and by pro-Ukrainian mappers. So this is the situation. Once again, as a result of attack, the Russians got closer to the western part and the southwestern part of Vuhledar. As for the city itself, the Russians managed to improve their positions around the school. So this is the school number 2, and the Russians reached the outskirts and to capture the first high-rise buildings in this area. Now let's talk about the common situation. According to information we have, the Ukrainians are completely encircled in this part of Vuhledar. If you remember, during the previous video we talked that the Ukrainians, the previous night from the 26th on the 27th of September was the last Ukrainian window of opportunities for the Ukrainians to escape the encirclement and to break through in the northern direction. And most likely the Ukrainians began concentration of forces in the northern part of Vuhledar, but the Russians, of course the Russians understand everything what Ukrainians may do, what kind of plans they can have. So that's why during the previous night the Russians were bombing and attacking the northern part of Vuhledar with the purpose not to allow the Ukrainians to organize the convoys for evacuation. And the Ukrainians didn't make their final attempt, last attempt, and the Ukrainians currently are blocked. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians were flying a lot above the western part, and according to information we have, the Russians were dropping different lists, different applications suggesting the Ukrainians to surrender. For example, in this video we can see a Russian soldier who was explaining the situation in Vuhledar. Then the Russians attached these lists of applications and lists to a drone, and then the Russians dropped this package of lists on the territory of Vuhledar that is under complete Ukraine control. And in this list we can find a short instruction what the Ukrainians should do if they want to save their lives and not to be destroyed as a result of Russian offensive operation or as a result of Russian FAB strikes or artillery strikes. So now let's discuss this short instruction. We have the picture of this, and according to information we have, the servicemen of the Ukraine armed forces blocked in Vuhledar. The command of Russian troops is addressing to you, to the Ukrainians. Vuhledar is surrounded. The city is under complete FAB control. All roads leading to Vuhledar are cut off. Your resistance is pointless. You are meaning Ukrainian. You have only one chance to return home alive. If you are in the eastern and the southern parts of the city, then you should call some code phrase, and to call this code phrase on certain frequencies. And the same story if the Ukrainians are in the western part. Russian servicemen guarantee you safety. Anyone who requires medical assistance will be provided. Anyone who decided to continue the resistance will be destroyed. So this is the short instructions that the Russians were spreading among the territory that is under complete Ukraine control. Of course, Zelensky and as for the Ukrainians of the 72nd Mechanized Brigade on the territory of Vuhledar, they're saying that they still haven't received any orders to retreat. And the thing is that today, on the Friday of 27th of September, there is going to be a meeting, the final problem meeting of Zelensky in his trip in the United States of America. Zelensky is going to have a meeting with Donald Trump. Trump said that he would meet Zelensky on Friday morning at his tower in New York. So this is the last last point. This is the last point in his meeting. He had meeting already with Kamala Harris. Now he will finish his trip with Donald Trump, and after that, most likely the Ukrainian soldiers of the 72nd Mechanized Brigade that are blocked in Vuhledar will receive an order to begin the breakthrough operation. But obviously we understand that most likely they will not be able to do this. Furthermore, some Ukrainian soldiers began surrendering, and this today we got lots of videos with a significant number of prisoners of war that were captured by the Russians around the stronghold of Vuhledar. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Kurakhivka direction. The Russian sources published the video how they managed to raise the flag on the territory of Gornyak. According to map updates, these Russians managed to enter this town a few days ago, but just today they published us the video with the Russian flag. The building was geolocated, but the most important that the Russians are still very careful when raising the flag in this point, which confirms that most likely the Russians haven't managed to move further deep inside of the town and they are still on the territory of these farms. Anyway, the Russians managed to gain a foothold, and now their objective is to improve their positions further in the southern direction. Now let's move and let's talk about the Pokrovsk-Mirnograd, about the Pokrovsk agglomeration. We have additional icons in this area. During the previous nights, pro-Ukrainian mappers and neutral mappers confirmed that the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to take under control around 50% of the village of Kurakhivka, and the Russians established complete control over the stronghold with the nickname of Guitar. This stronghold has a certain nickname and it's Guitar. Furthermore, the Ukrainian sources published another video how they were FPV droning and attacking the Russian infantry. You see Russians are running along this road, which confirms that this territory is under complete Russian control. Furthermore, during the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians conducted several counterattacks from the village of Promin with the tanks, but for example, this tank that was counterattacking the Russian offensive forces was discovered by the Russians and damaged a few times with Russian FPV drones, and later this tank was destroyed. This video confirms that Ukrainians lost control over Kurakhivka and over the stronghold of Guitar. And now, if we calculate the distance between the edge Russian positions in Guitar stronghold and Ukrainian positions in the village of in the Pokrovsk agglomeration, currently the distance is less than around 1 kilometer, which is obviously means that the clashes have already begun on the territory of Pokrovsk agglomeration. Now let's move further. We have additional updates from the city of Toretsk, and we have geolocation that confirms additional Russian progress in the northeastern part of the city. In this video, we can see Ukrainian FPV drones that were attacking the Russian forces in this part of the city, which confirms Russian control. And as you can see, according to this video, we have adjusted the map in Russian favor. If you remember, during the previous few weeks, the Russian main goal, the Russian main objective was to cut the city of Toretsk in two. And for these purposes, the Russians were attacking on the line between the Toretsk prison and the Toretsk citadel in the central part. And during the previous few days, we got a lot of geolocations that confirm Russian control over this territory. And when the Russians finished the process of splitting Toretsk in two, the Russians began offensive in the northeastern part in this area with the purpose to take this part first, and then most likely the Russians will continue with the coal mine and the landfills behind the coal mine. Now let's move to the city of Chasiv Yar, and during the previous night we also received additional updates of additional Russian progress on the ground. The Ukrainian sources published the video how they were FPV droning the Russians exactly in this point. Ukrainian FPV drone was attacking the Russian forces inside of this building, and based on this video most of the mappers have adjusted their maps in Russian favor. As we can see, the Russians are getting closer and closer to the citadel of Chasiv Yar. Now let's talk about Kupiansk direction, and the most important updates are coming from the north in Kupiansk area. If you remember, for the previous 2 or 3 weeks we've been talking just about one thing, about the blooming of Pishana flower. The Russians were moving in the northern direction, trying to reach northern Pishane. The Russians were improving their positions from Krakhmalne, Berestova and Kurakhivka with the purpose to move further in Lazova. So a lot of videos, a lot of updates and so on. And today pro-Ukrainian sources reported about significant significant Russian attack in the direction of the village of Kolesnikovka and Krugliakovka. This information was published by pro-Ukrainian mappers, and according to them, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians launched the biggest attack, however, with the use of 50 armored vehicles. At least 10 armored vehicles were moving in the direction of Krugliakovka, and around 40 units were moving in the direction of Kolesnikovka. So, summarizing everything, the main objective of the Russians during the previous 24 hours was to attack the Ukrainians on the line between Krugliakovka and Kolesnikovka. So the Russians were trying to take under control this territory with the use of 50 armored vehicles and a significant number of infantry. The Ukrainians are saying that during the previous night they managed to repel this Russian attack. Basically, according to the Ukrainians, they managed even to defeat them. But yet we haven't received even a single geolocation that can confirm this. Of course, we are waiting for additional updates today on the 27th of September. And the Ukrainians are saying they're taking into account that before this, the main success of the Russian armored force were achieved by infantry, this kind of mechanized assault become something new. Judging by everything, the Russians gave this area a certain priority. It is expected that they will again attack Russian-Ukrainian positions during the upcoming day. So today, on the 27th of September, is going to be decisive and a vital day for the Ukrainians in the Kupiansk direction, because if the Russians are able to take these two villages under control or to establish some foothold that they will be able to develop further, then the Kupiansk direction will be split in two, the northern Kupiansk and the southern Kupiansk direction separately, and then the Russians will handle with every single one separately. Now let's move further and let's talk about Vovchansk. The Ukrainians continue attempts to concentrate forces on the Russian side of Vovchansk, and the Russians control everything. They try to let's say prevent the Ukrainian all this situation, and that's why the Russians are bombing and attacking the Ukrainians with stealth flamethrowers in the aggregate plant. The Ukrainians are suffering significant losses. Now let's talk about the Kursk direction. We have additional updates. According to information we have, the Ukrainians are no longer going to develop their Sudzha offensive operation or the Kursk offensive operation, and now we receive report that Ukrainians began withdrawing process. Basically, it's not withdrawing, it's replacement process. If you remember the same story, the Ukrainians were planning to complete in Vuhledar. They were planning to remove the force of 72nd Mechanized Brigade and to replace them by the force of the Territory Defense Brigade, but something went wrong and the Ukrainians haven't managed to complete that situation, and now the Ukrainians are doing the same. According to information we have, the Ukrainians are planning to withdraw the forces of the 82nd Brigade and to replace them by the Territory Defense Brigade. This information means few things. First, the Ukrainians are not going to continue offensive operation, and the second thing, most likely the Ukrainians will not be able to hold this foothold by the territory defense, because it's not so motivated soldiers and they will be just destroyed by the Russians during the upcoming offensive counter-offensives by the Russians. So this is the situation. I believe that we can start counting weeks when the Sudzha salient will be cut by the Russians and returned back. And another important thing that I would like to discuss with you. If you remember, during the previous days, we were talking a lot about the changes in the Russian nuclear doctrine, and that NATO countries also decided to change their own nuclear doctrines as a response to the Russian changes. For example, Poland made significant changes in their nuclear doctrines, and Polish authorities reported that whoever uses nuclear weapon first is damned. So that means that if Russia uses nuclear weapon, Poland will damn Russia or something like this. So this is the answer. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds you we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.